Lieutenant Dan was just another character played by Gary Sinise in 1994. Then the letters began to arrive. His persona resonated with wounded veterans. They talked about their anguish, their hope, and their darkest moments. It was no longer just acting for Sinise. It was a vocation. After performing 570 gigs at military installations and generating $400 million for veterans, he is now finally sharing how one job led to a mission he never would have imagined. On March 17, 1955, Gary Sinise was born in Blue Island, Illinois. Storytelling was always a part of his environment because his father, Robert L. Sinise, was a film editor. Italian, English, Scottish, Irish, French, German, and Swedish ancestry were all mixed together in his family. He spent the majority of his early years in Highland Park, Illinois, after they relocated there. However, he was never good in school. He had trouble focusing and was constantly preoccupied with his own thoughts. His teachers thought he was a lazy child. Although he was always at risk of expulsion, his family never ceased helping him. Everything changed when he turned 16 in 1971. When a theater instructor passed by, he and his rock band pals were standing in a school hallway. More people were needed to audition for the school's production of West Side Story. Gary initially showed no attention, but soon he became aware of something. The theatrical program included a large number of female participants. He decided to try out because of that. He was given the part of Pepe, a little part with just 2 lines. On the last night of the show, something happened that didn't seem significant. He experienced an unprecedented surge of enthusiasm when the actors took their curtain call. Everything clicked, including the audience's enthusiasm and the sensation of being on stage. He had a clear idea of what he intended to do for the first time. Acting became everything after that. He saw it as his mission rather than merely a pastime. He didn't graduate on time, though, because education was still difficult for him. After eventually accumulating enough credits, he made a daring move in 1974 with 2 pals, Terry Kinney and Jeff Perry. They founded a theater company of their own. They gave it the name Steppenwolf in reference to Hermann Hesse's book. In January 1974, they had their first production in a church basement, and Miss Reardon had a few drinks. It was a tiny room. There weren't many resources, but they were unstoppable in their passion. Steppenwolf had developed by 1976. Laurie Metcalf and John Malkovich were among the other actors that joined. They were no longer just another little theater company. As a result of the popularity of their plays, Steppenwolf quickly rose to prominence as one of the nation's most prestigious theater groups. Gary, however, was directing as addition to performing. True West, a play by Sam Shepard, was his biggest hit in 1982. He co-starred with Malkovich and directed it. The play was intense and unvarnished. Audiences were captivated, and critics gave it high marks. He was recognized as more than just another budding actor when the play earned him an Obie Award. He was a powerful figure in the theater industry. His career was altered by that incident. As more chances arose, he began alternating between film and theater. Gary Sinise didn't take the typical route in Hollywood. He began his career in theater and worked his way up to the film industry. He made a daring move in 1988 when he directed his first significant motion picture, Miles from Home. Instead of losing their family farm to foreclosure, 2 brothers, played by Richard Gere and Kevin Anderson, set it on fire. They turned into folk heroes and criminals who robbed banks. Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, visited a genuine farm in 1959, which served as the inspiration for the movie. The story gained depth from that historical connection. Sinise contributed his experience in theater to the project. John Malkovich and Laurie Metcalf were among the numerous actors from the Steppenwolf Theater Company, which he co-founded. The entire movie was filmed in Iowa, which helped to keep it realistic. Filming a huge fire sequence, something Sinise had never done before, was one of the most difficult tasks. He subsequently called it a crash education in managing elaborate special effects. Despite receiving some critical acclaim and making it to the 1988 Cannes Film Festival, the film did not do well at the box office. Nevertheless, it demonstrated Sinise's keen storytelling skills. He concentrated on movies that had personal significance for him rather than pursuing major motion picture projects. In 1992, Sinise landed his first significant acting role in Keith Gordon's World War II thriller A Midnight Clear. An American intelligence outfit during the Battle of the Bulge was the subject of the movie, and violent psychological standoff resulted from their contact with a German unit that desired to surrender. Vance Mother Wilkins, portrayed by Sinise, was a soldier who started to lose it after hearing heartbreaking news from home. His performance was unvarnished and intensely intimate. He had other family who served in World War II, and his father had served in Korea. The part was considerably more potent because of that personal connection. The movie was different from other war films. Action sequences and large battles weren't the focus. It dealt on the psychological effects of war. Its powerful performances and anti-war message won accolades from critics. The film received praise for its originality and an 88% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Although it didn't become a hit, it demonstrated Sinise's depth as an actor. Based on the classic novel by John Steinbeck, he directed and starred in the film of Mice and Men that same year. He portrayed George Milton, who was attempting to shield his friend Lenny, who was played by John Malkovich and had a mental illness. Sinise understood exactly how he intended to adapt the story for the cinema because he had already directed it on stage at Steppenwolf. The film's emotional impact and accurate adaptation won accolades from critics. Malkovich's portrayal of Lenny was devastating, while Sinise's portrayal of George demonstrated quiet courage and profound melancholy. Without sacrificing the protagonist's intimate bonds, the movie depicted the brutal realities of America during the Great Depression. Despite its lackluster box office performance, it rose to prominence as one of the most prestigious literary adaptations in movie history. More significantly, it supported Sinise's years-long performance. He had no interest in flimsy narratives. His goal was to create films that will endure. Then came the movie that made him famous, Forrest Gump, in 1994. Sinise's portrayal of Lieutenant Dan Taylor left an impression on viewers. One of the most impactful performances in movie history is Gary Sinise's portrayal of Lieutenant Dan Taylor in Forrest Gump. Lieutenant Dan is from a long family of soldiers and has served in the Vietnam War. He thinks that, like his ancestors, he will die in combat. However, everything changes when he is pulled from the battlefield by Forrest Gump during an ambush. Lieutenant Dan is left without a leg. He is left feeling aimless and devastated. His personal struggle is just getting started, but the fight is over. Sun brings a genuine element to the part. Because they mirrored the experiences of many injured soldiers, Lieutenant Dan's rage, self-destruction, and gradual recovery appeared genuine. Forrest is pushed away by him. He consumes a lot of alcohol. He is furious with both the outside world and himself. However, his story changes with time. He and Forrest are partners in the shrimping enterprise. He makes investments in businesses such as Apple. He even walks at Forrest's wedding after receiving prosthetic legs. There is more to his journey than just survival. When everything appears lost, it's about discovering a new purpose. Sinise spoke with actual amputees and veterans to be ready for the role. He desired personal knowledge about their experiences. His performance, which is among the most realistic depictions of a wounded soldier ever seen on television, was influenced by that research. But outstanding acting wasn't enough for the movie. In 1994, the visual effects employed to cut off Sinise's legs were revolutionary. They were digitally erased with blue stockings and industrial light and magic. Hidden cutouts and furniture were used in some of the scenes that were shot. Many onlookers thought the performer was an amputee because the computer-generated imagery was so lifelike. When he saw the finished version, even Sinise was taken aback. He was nominated for a 1995 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance. His portrayal of his character's emotional and physical suffering was hailed by critics. But his contribution had an effect that extended beyond accolades. Lieutenant Dan came to represent injured veterans. It was uncommon for Hollywood to portray wounded veterans as more than tragic characters. That was altered by Sinise's performance. Lieutenant Dan found optimism despite his anger and confusion. He demonstrated that life could go on. Remarkably, Sinise nearly declined the position. He was mostly a theater actor at the time. He was uncertain about his ability to portray such a difficult persona. However, Tom Hanks urged him to give it his all. Hanks recognized the possibility of something unique. Sinise's life changed when he made the leap. Gary Sinise had no idea how much his role as Lieutenant Dan Taylor would alter his life when Forrest Gump was released in 1994. Letters and phone calls began to pour in almost immediately. The character struck a strong chord with Vietnam veterans, many of whom were amputees or were dealing with the psychological effects of the conflict. Lieutenant Dan's transformation from rage and hopelessness to acceptance and recovery seemed intimate. Some veterans talked of their darkest hours. Other people discussed starting over. Many merely stated that they felt seen while they saw Lieutenant Dan on screen. Sinise never anticipated this type of reaction. At first, he added, playing Lieutenant was just another role. But as the messages continued to arrive, he came to understand that the character represented something much more significant. Veterans saw Lieutenant Dan as a reflection of their own hardships. His story, some said, gave them hope. Some claimed it brought back memories of a friend they had lost. Sinise began to realize that this was more than simply a film. It was about actual folks who had given their all. Sinise received an invitation to attend the Disabled American Veterans, or DAV, National Convention in Chicago in August of that year. Over 2,000 injured veterans were waiting for him as he took the stage. The room erupted in cheers as soon as they saw him. These were men who had served in Korea, Vietnam, and World War II. Many had suffered limb loss. Many have fought for recognition for years. They were now applauding a performer who had made their experiences come to life. DAV gave Sinise the National Commander's Award that evening. The award's inscription expressed gratitude to him for raising awareness of the sacrifices made by disabled veterans across the country. Later on, he described this event as life-changing. He had never been in the armed forces. He had never been in combat. However, he now had a new sense of purpose as he stood in front of these men. Sinise continued to communicate with DAV after that evening. He went to events. He gave speeches at events. He backed their endeavors to aid injured veterans. He got involved in several projects throughout the years, including as the 2014 completion of the American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial in Washington, D.C. He continued to work after that. He had learned a valuable lesson from playing Lieutenant Dan. A film could be more than merely a form of amusement. It might cause them to see things differently. They might become concerned. For Sinise, Lieutenant Dan's story was about more than just the past. It was about actual veterans continuing to fight long after the war was over. And he was aware that he couldn't ignore that. In 2011, he carried that devotion even further by forming the Gary Sinise Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting veterans, first responders, and their families. The foundation's mission is clear. It offers assistance to those who have served their country, particularly those who are coping with traumatic brain injuries, severe injuries, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The Avalon Network, which was established in 2021 to assist first responders and veterans dealing with the invisible scars of war, is one of its most significant initiatives. The network offers specialist care for traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder at 20 treatment facilities nationwide. The Home Depot's co-founders, Arthur Blank and Bernie Marcus, donated $40 million to make it happen. They gave it its name in honor of the fabled island of Avalon, where King Arthur sought solace following a battle. It was no coincidence that the name was chosen. For those who have made so many sacrifices, the intention was to establish a haven of healing and hope. The foundation has raised more than $400 million to support its initiatives since its founding. With the help of philanthropic donations, business sponsors, and individual donors, it has already surpassed $300 million by 2021. The results of the funding have been tangible and transformative. Veterans with severe injuries can now live independently and with dignity thanks to the 81 specially designed smart houses that the foundation has constructed. More than 1 million meals have been given to first responders and military members. Additionally, it has held over 500 performances by Sinise's musical group, the Lieutenant Dan Band, to raise spirits among service members and their families. RISE, which stands for Restoring Independence Supporting Empowerment, is one of its most effective initiatives. The goal of this project is to construct smart homes for seriously injured veterans without requiring a mortgage. Voice-activated technology, wheelchair accessibility, and other adaptive features that make daily living easier are all part of these specially constructed homes that are tailored to each person's needs. In addition to housing, RISE helps injured veterans regain their freedom by offering adapted vehicles, mobility aids, and house renovations. Families who have lost a loved one while serving in the military are also contacted by the foundation. One of its most compassionate initiatives, Snowball Express, provides assistance to the children of slain heroes. It brings Gold Star families together annually for special events, such as a December all-expense-paid vacation to Disney World. The holidays are the most difficult time of year for a lot of these families. They may connect, heal, and know they are not alone at Snowball Express. Beyond its programs, the Gary Sinise Foundation is well known. Its operational efficiency has earned it recognition. Nearly 90% of all donations made in 2018 went directly to first responder and veteran support organizations. Charity watchdogs have given the organization high marks for its degree of transparency. Furthermore, He continued to hear the same thing when he started traveling to troops on USO tours in the early 2000s. He wasn't referred to as Gary. Lieutenant Dan was his given name. He got an idea from that link. Sinise and composer Kimo Williams formed the LTDN band in 2003 with the goal of providing live music to individuals in need. When Sinise proposed taking the band on tour, what had begun as a friendly jam session in Chicago swiftly grew into something more. They performed for servicemen based in Korea, Singapore, and Diego Garcia for the first time in February 2004. Although it was intended to be a one-time event, the impact was evident. It was impossible to overlook the enthusiasm in the crowd, the way the music uplifted people's moods, and the troops' appreciation. The Lieutenant Dan Band evolved from a musical group to something more. It turned into a mission. They played at hospitals, military installations, and charitable functions during their more than 570 performances worldwide over the ensuing 20 years. With an average of 30 to 40 concerts annually, many of which were a part of military resiliency initiatives or USO tours, they had a busy schedule. From rock and pop to Motown, country, and even Disney classics, the band's set list was created to be as inclusive as possible. The objective was always the same, regardless of where they played. Remind military troops they weren't forgotten, spread happiness, and raise spirits. Their 570th show in Fort Knox in 2024 was one of their most memorable performances. Sinise performed songs that evening in honor of the men and women who had made such sacrifices, letting them know how much their service was appreciated. New recruits who had just started their training at Great Lakes Naval Base cited the band's visit as one of the highlights of their time there. These were not only concerts. They gave soldiers an opportunity to relax, join in, and experience something different from their everyday lives. Beyond the band, Sinise remained dedicated to the military. In order to further assist veterans, first responders, and their families, he established the Gary Sinise Foundation in 2011. The charity offered specialized automobiles for people with impairments, constructed specially adapted homes for critically wounded service personnel, and even arranged for the families of slain troops to visit Disney World. Sinise continued to believe that music was one of the most effective means of fostering interpersonal relationships in spite of all of these efforts. He did more than merely play at his gigs. They served as reminders that service members were never alone wherever they were stationed, as well as actions of gratitude and moments of solidarity. Gary Sinise demonstrated that he was more than simply Lieutenant Dan after Forrest Gump in 1994. He took on roles that kept him at the top of his game, challenged him, and had an impact. He portrayed astronaut Ken Mattingly in the 1995 film Apollo 13, which told the compelling tale of the nearly fatal NASA mission. Concerns about disease had forced his character to leave the flight, but rather than becoming a supporting character, he played a crucial role in the rescue. With approximately $355 million made globally and 9 Academy Award nominations, the movie was an enormous hit. His portrayal transformed what may have been a supporting role into one of the most captivating aspects of the movie by capturing the silent annoyance of a guy compelled to observe from the sidelines. Sinise played President Harry S. Truman in HBO's Truman that same year, portraying another real-life person. He received a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a television film or miniseries because of how convincing his performance was. In George Wallace, 1997, he played the contentious governor of Alabama, continuing his run of strong performances. Wallace's political ascent, his notoriously segregationist views, and his eventual metamorphosis following an assassination attempt that left him crippled were all covered in the movie. Sinise gave a powerful, multi-layered performance, bringing him a Primetime Emmy for Best Lead Actor in a film or miniseries. He possessed a unique talent for giving historical personalities a sense of complexity and humanity, elevating them above the status of fictional characters. He reteamed with Tom Hanks in the 1999 movie The Green Mile, which was adapted from Stephen King's book. The film chronicled the lives of death row prison guards, focusing on an enigmatic prisoner possessing extraordinary powers. The movie garnered 4 Academy Award nominations and made over $286 million worldwide. Despite playing a tiny part, Sinise's presence gave an already compelling storyline a deeper level of depth. Major actors were increasingly using television by the early 2000s, and Sinise established himself in one of the era's most prosperous franchises. He started playing Detective Mac Taylor in CSY New York in 2004. He was a man molded by personal grief, strong but incredibly moral. When the episode disclosed that Mac's wife had perished in the September 11th attacks, it gave his character a poignant emotional resonance. Senna was the constant force at the heart of the program for 9 seasons and 197 episodes. His portrayal helped distinguish the CSI series from the rest of the franchise by making Mac Taylor one of the most enduring characters in the world. He has played a few chosen roles in recent years, including Dr. Robert Ellman in Netflix's 13 Reasons Why in 2020 and Special Agent Jack Garrett in Criminal Minds, Beyond Borders, 2016 to 2017. Grateful American, A Journey from Self to Service, his memoir, also described his path from Hollywood to a life of service. In the meantime, Maura Harris and Gary Sinise have been together for more than 40 years, which is uncommon in Hollywood. While studying acting at Illinois State University, they initially crossed paths. There were highs and lows in their love journey. They once sent out invites and arranged a wedding, then Maura changed their mind, so they called it off. In 1981, they eventually reconnected and were married later that year. On April 19, 1954, Maura Harris was born in Pontiac, Illinois. She established a successful playing career of her own, including appearances in Tall Tale, the television series The Equalizer, and Mice and Men, which Gary directed. She eventually stopped performing in 2003, but in 2013, she briefly returned to the stage. There were challenges along the way. She struggled with alcoholism in the 1990s. She checked herself into a treatment facility in 1997 and has been alcohol-free ever since. Together, they created a life and brought up 3 kids. In 1988, Sophie was born. Mac, whose real name is McKenna Anthony, was born in 1990 and Ella in 1992. When Mac died in 2024, their family was devastated. Their marriage held up well in the face of every obstacle. Senna frequently attributes their enduring relationship to Maura's Irish sense of humor. He claims that she brings him joy every single day. Over time, their common ideals also grew stronger. Maura strengthened their faith, which was already very important to them, by becoming a Catholic in 2000. Sinise gained notoriety outside of the entertainment industry for his commitment to conservative and military issues. He established Friends of Abe, a Hollywood conservative networking group, in 2005. He has always been outspoken about his support for the military. His name was featured in a 2006 Los Angeles Times ad endorsing Israel in the war in Lebanon while denouncing Hamas and Hezbollah. He conducted the virtual tour at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and spoke at the centennial celebration of Ronald Reagan's birth in 2011. Over the years, his political activity generated conjecture. Former George W. Bush and John McCain advisor Nicole Wallace predicted in 2009 that he might be a formidable Republican presidential candidate in 2012. He made it apparent where he drew the line when he contributed to Mitt Romney's campaign that year. He has traditionally been a Republican, but in 2016, he declined to back Donald Trump. He also took issue with Trump's remarks against John McCain, specifically when he questioned McCain's military hero credentials due to his capture during the Vietnam military. He has received numerous accolades for his commitment to service. He received the 2015 Sylvanus Thayer Award from the West Point Association of Graduates, which recognizes non-graduates who best represent the principles of the U.S. Military Academy. For his efforts with the Gary Sinise Foundation, he received a humanitarian award from the Location Managers Guild in 2020. He cited President Calvin Coolidge when accepting the prize, stating that, "The nation which forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten." A prosperous career, decades of marriage, and a strong desire to give back extend well beyond Hollywood. His life is still defined by his commitment to his family and his service to others.